Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 38. Symmetry group of the language, the perfect rephrasings. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. We now continue our profound journey through Episode 8, the pure abstract language of the Holophase audio series, moving to Part 38, Symmetry Group of the Language, the Perfect Rephrasings, Book 8.11, Automorphisms. Up to now, we have discovered something beautiful. The same phi story can be written in many different coordinate systems and still describe the same reality. We learned about representation freedom. We saw that the story of the universe exists independently of any one way of writing it down, and that coordinates are just different grids we draw on the same living fabric. But this deeper understanding naturally raises an even sharper question. What are the most perfect rephrasings of all? Not just new coordinates, not just different units, but transformations of the phi field itself that change its appearance while leaving every single rule, every derivative relation, every grammatical law of the language exactly intact. These deepest rephrasings are called automorphisms, which literally means self-shapes. They are the symmetry group of the phi language itself. And today we begin to see that these abstract symmetries are not just mathematical curiosities. They will become the most powerful organizing principles in all of physics. 1. The story core, the perfect paraphrase. Imagine you are a poet, and you have written one perfect poem. Every word feels right, the rhythm flows, the imagery lands. You finish it, and you know, in your heart, that nothing more needs to be added or removed. Now someone asks you, can you tell the exact same poem in completely different words? Not a loose summary, not a watered-down version, but a new poem that carries exactly the same meaning, the same emotional weight, the same truth, even though almost every word is changed. The sun sets behind purple mountains might become evening paints the peaks in violet shadow. The images are slightly different, the wording shifts, but in your mind, the same scene appears: the fading light, the quiet hills, the feeling of day dissolving into night. These are perfect paraphrases. The clothing changes, but the soul remains. Automorphisms of the phi language are like these perfect paraphrases. They transform phi into a new version of itself, phi prime, such that every grammatical rule still holds in exactly the same way. All the allowed derivatives are still allowed. All the forbidden combinations are still forbidden. Every pattern of change, every interaction law, every structural relation remains true. Before the transformation and after the transformation, the language behaves in exactly the same way. In this sense, the two versions are not just similar. They are the same abstract story, written in different handwriting. This is what we mean by the symmetry group of the language, the complete set of all transformations that take the language into itself without breaking its grammar. 2. The linguistic role, grammar-preserving rewrites. In ordinary language, we already know a simpler version of this idea. Think of the sentences. The cat sat on the mat. On the mat sat the cat. The mat was sat on by the cat. The word order changes. One sentence is active voice, one is passive. But the basic relationship between cat and mat is identical. The same creature sits on the same surface. These are grammar-preserving rewrites. They use the rules of the language to rearrange the sentence while keeping its meaning. Automorphisms of phi are like the deepest possible grammar-preserving rewrites. They do not simply shuffle the visible words, they act on the underlying field itself. We might shift the whole field by a constant amount. Phi becomes phi plus some constant. If all the rules of the language only depend on differences and derivatives of phi, then nothing truly changes. The stories about how phi varies across space and time remain identical. We might multiply phi by an overall phase, if phi is complex. Phi becomes e to the I times theta times phi. Every value of phi rotates in the complex plane by the same angle. If the grammar only cares about relative phases, not the absolute phase, then again, nothing essential changes. We might rescale phi by a constant factor. Phi becomes lambda times phi. If all the meaningful quantities are ratios or normalized values, this too might leave the language completely intact. Each of these is a candidate for a symmetry of the language. When such a transformation really does leave every grammatical rule unchanged, it becomes part of the symmetry group. When it only preserves some rules but breaks others, it is not an automorphism of the whole language, only of some smaller part. 3. The scientific essence. When different patterns are actually the same. The central scientific question here is simple to state but profound in consequence. When do two different-looking phi patterns actually represent the same physical situation? To make this very concrete, imagine phi encodes temperature in a room. At one moment, corner A is 20 degrees and corner B is 25 degrees. The difference is 5 degrees, and heat will flow from the warmer corner to the cooler one. Now imagine we instantly add 5 degrees to the temperature everywhere in the room. Corner A becomes 25 degrees, corner B becomes 30 degrees, and everything else shifts up by 5 as well. What has changed physically? The differences between points remain exactly the same. The gradients are identical. The direction and rate of heat flow do not change. All the real physical behaviors are unchanged. If the phi language for this system is written only in terms of differences and derivatives, then adding a constant to phi is an automorphism. It is a perfect paraphrase of the state of the room. The symbols changed, but the physical story did not. This is the key idea. An automorphism separates what is physically meaningful from what is merely a matter of description. It tells us which aspects of phi have real consequences and which aspects are gauge or redundant, able to change without changing reality. In our future journey into physics, these will appear as gauge symmetries and global symmetries, but here we are seeing them in their pure abstract form, as deep invariances of the language itself. 4. Dimensional expression. Symmetries across time, space, and motion. These perfect rephrasings do not act only on phi's values. They act on the three echoes, time, space, and motion, together. First, temporal symmetries. If the rules of the language do not single out any special moment as the true beginning, then we can shift all events in time by a constant amount and the grammar still holds. This is time translation symmetry. The equations that relate phi at one time to phi at another look the same, no matter where you choose your zero. Second, spatial symmetries. If the rules do not privilege any special place as the center of the universe, then we can shift everything in space by a constant vector and nothing changes. This is space translation symmetry. The relationships between neighboring points, the way phi spreads and propagates, all remain the same. Third, motional symmetries. If the language describes only relative motion, not motion against some hidden absolute background, then we can change to a uniformly moving frame of reference and the grammar still holds. This is boost symmetry, the statement that the core rules of the language are the same for observers moving at constant speeds relative to one another. When these symmetries are combined, we get a rich family of automorphisms that mix time, space, and motion while leaving the deep grammatical structure untouched. In more advanced physics, these are encoded in groups like the Galilean group or the Lorentz and Poincaré groups, but for our purposes, we simply see them as different perfect rephrasings of the same triune story. Fifth, position in the master tree, the invisible architecture. Where do these symmetries live in the master tree of the language? The visible parts of the tree are the structures we have been carefully building: the derivatives, the topological patterns, the waveforms, the quadratic forms, the information measures. These are the branches, leaves, and fruit. The symmetry group is more like the invisible architecture of the soil and the environment. It is the set of transformations under which the entire tree could be shifted, rotated, or relabeled while still being the same tree. If we could magically lift the whole tree, move it a few meters, and set it down again without disturbing its structure, that would be like a spatial translation symmetry. If we could spin the entire tree smoothly around its trunk and it looked identical, that would be like a rotational symmetry. In the abstract language, automorphisms are the transformations under which the whole relational structure of phi and its derivatives remains exactly the same. They act like hidden constraints on how the tree can grow. The existence of these symmetries and the exact way they fit together into a group tells us something deep about what kind of organism this language really is. 6. Relations to neighbors. Symmetry touching every concept. Every major concept we have explored is touched by symmetry. Derivatives are defined in a way that is usually designed to respect certain symmetries. For example, if we write the rules so that only differences in phi appear, we automatically build in shift symmetry. Topological properties, like winding numbers and knots, are invariant under smooth deformations. If you stretch or bend the field without cutting or gluing, the topological class does not change. These are symmetries of the embedding, and they ensure that certain features are robust. Holonomy, the memory of moving around a loop, is often defined to be invariant under local rephrasings. In gauge theory language, this means that the observable phase shifts are left unchanged by gauge transformations. The automorphisms are built so that the actual physical memory is untouched. Quadratic forms, such as those we use to define intensities or actions, are often chosen to be invariant under specific symmetry groups. For instance, in relativity, the space-time interval combines time and space derivatives in a way that stays the same under Lorentz transformations. Even representation freedom, the ability to use different coordinates or bases, interacts with symmetry. Some symmetries are clearer in one representation than another, and part of the art of choosing a good representation is making the symmetry of the problem as transparent as possible. 7. Semantic meaning. Why symmetry matters for understanding. Symmetry might sound like a technical topic, but its semantic role is simple and powerful. It helps us understand what is essential. By showing us which transformations change nothing about the behavior of the language, symmetry tells us which aspects of our description are conventional and which aspects are real structure. If you can shift all of phi by a constant and nothing changes, then absolute zero of phi is not meaningful. If you can rotate coordinates and the laws stay the same, then up and north are not built into the fabric of reality, only into our chosen map. Symmetry also organizes the space of possibilities. Patterns that are related by the symmetry group can be treated as one family. Instead of cataloging each configuration separately, we classify them by how they transform. This vastly compresses the information we need to describe the language. Finally, symmetry gives rise to powerful constraints. Once you assume a certain symmetry, many forms of the rules are ruled out automatically. The language is forced into a narrower, more structured shape. This is why symmetry is so helpful when we later build physical theories. It prunes away countless possibilities that would otherwise need to be tested one by one. Stability and falsifiability when symmetry is too big. Symmetry is not a free decoration. It is a claim about reality, and like any claim, it can fail. Our falsifiability seed here is very direct. If we claim that a certain transformation of phi is an automorphism of the language, meaning it should leave all physical predictions unchanged, but careful experiments show that configurations related by this transformation behave differently, then one of two things must be wrong. Either our proposed symmetry group is too large and includes transformations that nature does not actually respect, or our mapping from phi to physical observables is mistaken. A historical example from physics makes this vivid. For a long time, it was assumed that replacing every particle with its antiparticle, flipping all charges, would leave the laws of nature unchanged. This is called charge conjugation symmetry. But experiments in the mid-20th century showed that certain weak processes behave differently for matter and antimatter. The symmetry was not exact. In our phi language, that would correspond to discovering that a transformation we thought was an automorphism of the grammar, in fact, changes the observable consequences. When this happens, we must revise our view of the symmetry group. We shrink it to the true set of automorphisms, or we refine our understanding of how phi connects to physical reality. The important point is that symmetry is testable. Each proposed symmetry says, do this to the system, and nothing observable should change. If something does change, the symmetry claim is falsified and the language must be updated. Next, examples across scales. Symmetry you already know. Although automorphisms can sound abstract, you already live inside them every day. When a melody is played in a different musical key, you still recognize the song. Transposing from C major to D major changes every note, but preserves all the intervals. Musically, it is the same piece. Transposition is a symmetry of melody space. When you rotate a simple geometric shape, like a perfect snowflake, by 60 degrees, it looks identical. You cannot tell whether it has been rotated or not. The snowflake's shape has a rotational symmetry. When you read a recipe written in metric units instead of cups and teaspoons, you still bake the same cake. Changing units is a symmetry of the underlying proportions. When you change which side of the map is up, the city's streets and the locations of its buildings do not move. Rotating the map is a symmetry of the geography. These are all everyday shadows of the deeper idea. There are transformations that make things look different to us, but do not change the underlying relationships. The symmetry group of the language collects all such transformations at the most fundamental level. Human and abstract analogies. The same life told many ways. One more analogy makes this deeply human. Imagine your own life story. You could tell it as a timeline of dates and events. You could tell it as a journey of lessons learned. You could tell it as a sequence of relationships. You could tell it as a spiritual path, an intellectual path, or a struggle for survival. Each version chooses different words, different structure, different emphasis. Yet all of them, if told honestly, describe the same underlying reality. The same person, the same decisions, the same consequences. These are like narrative automorphisms, different tellings that preserve the essential pattern of your life. Now imagine that some elements of your story cannot change without turning you into a different person. If you remove all your relationships or all your struggles, it is not the same life anymore. Those parts are invariant. They are like the core features that remain fixed under rephrasings. In the same way, the automorphism group of phi shows us which aspects of the universal story can be rephrased freely, and which aspects are locked in place by the very nature of the language. 11. Recognition skill. Learning to spot the hidden sameness. How can you train yourself to see symmetry in the wild? Whenever you notice two situations that seem different on the surface but behave the same way, pause and ask, what transformation takes one into the other? What is being preserved? If you move your chair to the other side of the room, you are in a new place, but gravity, breathing, and the way your heart beats are unchanged. The physical laws are symmetric under small shifts in your position. If you listen to the same song played on a piano and then on a violin, the timbre changes, but the melody remains. There is a transformation from one instrument's sound space to another that preserves the pattern. If you experience joy from helping one person and then feel a very similar joy from helping someone else, there is a symmetry in the structure of compassion that transcends the particular phases involved. By looking for what stays the same when other things change, you practice seeing the invariance. You begin to think in terms of equivalence classes, families of different appearances united by a single underlying pattern. This is exactly the mental habit we need for fluency in the holophase language, seeing beyond the surface differences in phi to the stable relationships that symmetry reveals. 12. Return to phi. One substance, infinite perfect rephrasings. As always, we return to our single field. The existence of a rich symmetry group means that phi possesses built-in ways of reshaping itself that leave its own laws untouched. Phi can be shifted, rotated, rephased, and transformed in coordinated ways, and yet its fundamental grammar continues to hold. From the holophase point of view, this is not a coincidence. It is a signature of what phi is. It is not just any random field. It is a field with deep internal self-similarities. Those self-similarities are the roots of conservation laws, gauge principles, and the elegant regularities of physics. Later, when we watch phi become electromagnetism, the weak and strong forces, and perhaps gravity itself, we will see these symmetries taking on familiar forms: electric charge conservation, Lorentz invariance, gauge invariance. Each will appear as a visible shadow of a deeper automorphism of the language. For now, you only need to hold this simple but powerful thought. The symmetries of nature are the perfect rephrasings of phi. Whenever you see something that can be changed in many ways while keeping its behavior the same, a melody transposed, a shape rotated, a law written in different symbols, you are glimpsing, in a small way, the vast symmetry group of the universal language. And you, as a pattern of phi, are not outside this. Your thoughts, your memories, your shifting self-perceptions are also rephrasings of a deeper identity. There is a kind of symmetry even in your inner life. Different moods, different stories, but one continuous being. With this part, we are very close to the summit of Episode 8. We have met representation freedom and now the symmetry group of the language. In the final part of this episode, we will weave everything together: consistency, completeness, universality, mapping, filtering, epistemic access, representation, and symmetry. We will see the full cathedral at once. Then, at last, we will be ready to descend into physics, to watch this pure language become the concrete world. Until then, remember, there is one field, phi, echoing through time, space, and motion. There are infinitely many ways to write its story, but one underlying reality that all true rephrasings share. You are learning to hear that reality beneath the words. Salam, and peace be upon you. 13. Deepening the view. Symmetry, broken symmetry, and individuality. Before we close, let us deepen this picture just a little more, in a way that connects the most abstract symmetry talk to the very concrete fact that the world is not perfectly uniform. If symmetries are so fundamental, you might ask, why does the universe not look completely featureless? If space is symmetric under translations, why is there a galaxy here and not there? If the laws do not care about direction, why are mountains piled up in one place and oceans pooled in another? If phi has such beautiful self-similarities, why does reality look so particular, so irregular, so specific? The answer lives in the idea of broken symmetry. The rules have a symmetry, but the actual state does not have to show it. Think of a perfectly round pencil balanced upright on its tip. The laws are symmetric under rotations. Any direction is as good as any other. But when the pencil finally falls, it picks one direction and lies down there. The symmetry in the laws remains, but the actual outcome selects a specific branch. In the phi language, the automorphism group tells us about symmetries of the grammar, not necessarily symmetries of every solution. The allowed patterns may be shifted, rotated, or rephased without breaking the rules, but a particular realized pattern might still be lopsided, clustered, or biased. This is how a symmetric language can give rise to a richly structured, asymmetric universe. You can see the same thing in your own life. As a human being, you are capable of learning many languages, living in many cities, taking many possible paths. Your grammar of possibility has a wide symmetry. You could have been a musician, an engineer, a teacher, or a parent in countless arrangements. But your actual life has chosen one particular path through that space of options. The symmetry of what was possible remains in the background, while the specific pattern of choices breaks that symmetry and creates individuality. When we later enter physics proper, we will see that many of the most interesting phenomena, from the shapes of crystals to the phases of matter to the very existence of distinct forces, emerge when symmetries of the fundamental language are hidden or broken in specific ways. The symmetry group is like the master menu. The world is like one particular meal ordered from it. Holding these together, you can honor two truths at once. On one level, everything is phi, structured by a deep, elegant group of self rephrasings. On another level, you, this moment, this universe, are a unique, unrepeatable pattern, a very specific sentence written within that language. Seen this way, symmetry is not the enemy of uniqueness. It is the fertile soil from which uniqueness grows. 14. Practicing the language, a daily exercise. To close this part of our journey, let me offer a simple exercise you can quietly practice in everyday life to internalize the idea of symmetry in the Holophase sense. Pick one ordinary situation each day: making tea, walking down the street, speaking with a friend. For that small window of time, gently ask yourself three questions. First, if I shifted this whole scene in space, would anything essential change? Imagine the same conversation in a different room or on a different street. You will notice that many aspects are about relative positions and relationships, not absolute location. This trains your intuition for translation symmetry. Second, if I replay this scene at a different overall pace, would its meaning change? Imagine the conversation more slowly or the walk more quickly. Some changes matter, but much of the structure, who listens, who speaks, who leads, who follows, is preserved. This trains your sense for temporal and motional symmetries, patterns of order and relation rather than absolute speed. Third, if I were to tell this moment as a story to someone else, how many honest rephrasings could I find that keep the same core truth? Try describing it in a factual way, then in an emotional way, then in a metaphorical way. Each faithful retelling is a small echo of an automorphism, a different surface form that preserves the inner pattern. If you keep this practice gentle and playful, over time you will start to feel the difference between what changes when you rephrase life and what stubbornly stays the same. That distinction between form and essence, between symbol and invariant, is exactly the intuition we need when we later meet the symmetry group of phi written in mathematics. You are not just learning an abstract idea, you are also training your nervous system to think a little more like the language itself. Let this awareness grow naturally. Peace be upon you.